think you'll all really enjoy what we have prepared to speak about today. Gentlemen, please share more about yourselves and your backgrounds with the audience, starting with John, please.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is John Araki. I'm the CFO of Recovery One. We are a digital health company whose purpose in life is to improve the cost and quality and patient experience for recovery from musculoskeletal injuries. So like soft tissue injuries for all your major joints in the body. I have a very 25-year career in finance and all the nooks and crannies of it, from real estate lending to structured finance and corporate finance. Always had a more than passing interest in the healthcare space, and this opportunity presented itself a number of years ago. And we're a VC-backed company that we've been organically growing the company for the last 3 or 4 years, and looking forward to a lively discussion with my colleagues this morning.
Thanks,
hello, everyone.
John. Craig.
I'm Craig Fryer from Austin, Texas. Thanks for joining us today. I work with Banking On as the COO, and Banking On delivers to our clients the enabling ability to create excellent digital mobile banking experiences for their customers. Principally, our clients are credit unions and small community banks. And so I've been in fintech for a few years. I've been in data for the majority of my career. I've also been a venture partner, and I'm an active angel investor, typically in data these days, making investments there. I also served as a chief data officer at a Fortune 100 and a global multinational. So very interested in these economic wins we're facing. I've been talking a lot with my executive team here about these challenges. I'm also have been a Consero client and benefited greatly from their valuable services. So glad to participate in today's session, and thanks for the invite to do so.
I'm Raj Lakhani. I'm the CFO at Core. We are a payment solution company, payment solutions, revenue management, and customer engagement company. I've been here roughly 4 years, and we have been growing both organically and inorganically. Fortunately, I've worked for 3 multinational companies in my career so far: IBM, Microsoft, Wolters Kluwer, and I also have been CFO at 3 PE-backed companies. And so this mixture of experience, and the scale has taught me a lot. And I'm here to share my experience with you guys. And I'm also here to learn from my colleagues as well. Thank you. Thanks, Consero, for giving this opportunity.
Well, thanks everybody for taking the time for this today. Let's get started with the first question. And just as far as format, I'll be directing some of these questions towards specific panelists, but encourage everyone to jump in with any additional points our audience might benefit from. So this first question is for Craig. Craig, so in the face of these economic headwinds that we're starting to see, companies are digitally transforming their companies and their business models. What tools should C-suite executives be considering to make their organizations more efficient and competitive? And with that, in our prep session, you shared a framework that you use for thinking about investments in digital transformation, and was hoping you could get into that a bit.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for that. And so as we're taking a look at what last year Jamie Dimon considered not just headwinds, but hurricane force, and also if you're familiar with Sequoia Investments, they gathered all their portfolio CEOs last year and said that we're heading for what they characterize as a crucible moment unique in the history of modern business, and that the companies that are going to be adaptive and agile are going to be the ones that do well and fare well and potentially survive. And so when I often come into a business setting, I did this when I joined Banking On. Banking On had grown their client base very quickly. But my question to them, as I would say, offer as a framework is, okay, you're doing good business, you have loyal customers, you built a great culture, but how efficient and effective are you at doing these things? And oftentimes I get, response of, we're really not sure because we don't know how to measure the optimization and utilization of our teams, of our resources in terms of executing the business objectives. And so the framework that I often put into place is to characterize what those key measures and metrics are for efficiency and effectiveness in the business. As opposed to in the past, I've seen financial models that just bluntly say, okay, we need to cut 15% because we're short on revenue. Instead, I advocate looking at departmental or business unit metrics that can say, hey, we've got some issues in customer support. There's some high nails there. Or we're not quite making it on converting our funnel. So if you can put those measures and metrics in place for each business unit, each functional group that help you to understand how efficient and effective you are, that could really give you a heads up and a leg up in making progress on digital transformation.
Appreciate that insight, Craig. Raj, John, anything you might add there? All right, we'll move on to the next question. And John, this one is for you. Right, looking at the current rate environment, right, high inflation, scarce talent, just everything that's going on, global supply chains that are being constrained, and really squeezing corporate operations. What would you say are some of the things executives should be doing in this environment to manage their resources and spend strategically?
Yeah, it's fun times out here right now. When people talk about managing resources or cutting costs or whatever the case may be, I'm always struck by the fact that there's always a second part of that mandate or sentence that never gets said out loud, right? There's we need to cut our OpEx by X% while doing this, right? And sometimes you're being asked to do more with the same amount of resources. Sometimes you're being asked to do less with less or more with less, which is never ideal, but there's sort of a caveat. There's always a constraint to the resource management that you're trying to accomplish. So I think one of the things that, as you start making hard choices, and some of these choices are very hard and difficult, that is important to I think as a leadership team to really understand what you're going for, right? Because that'll drive all the decisions. And sometimes, CFOs like myself, we often get lost in the numbers. Sometimes we get obsessed with making our OpEx look like X million dollars or whatever the case may be. And we forget that not all dollars are equal, right? Or not all dollars are contributing to the organization in different ways or linearly. And so I think that's one thing that advice that I've been given that's really good to think through. And then the only other thing is very practical, and probably really obvious, but I think by the time you're talking about having to make these and put these in place in real form, it's often too late, meaning it's not it's not the best way to go about it, right? So my only suggestion would be to do the work early, think through these scenarios, even if it's in nothing but maybe your own head, and maybe it's nowhere else. But it's never a pleasant thing to think through, and especially with a group of people or a leadership team. But do the work ahead of time to some extent, and to give yourself some framework to think through it when you have to implement. Because by the time you have to implement, it often ends up looking haphazard, and maybe you're making decisions that aren't ideal in the moment. So that would be my two things.
I would like to add to John, by the way. Craig, go ahead.
And to build on that, don't delay the inevitable. I mean, this was the point of the Sequoia deck, is they drew two lines. One was that you go ahead and take the decision and start building from that. The other one is just delay, and then you have this death spiral that they reflect. So we've done that very intentionally, starting in last March, thinking through some of the inevitabilities that we're now starting to see. And the other thing that's really core is making sure your leadership team is aligned on what John suggested, what those objectives are. So if it's do more with less, make sure everybody's lined up and pulling the rope the same way, because this could be where the culture really starts to crack.
I will basically summarize what both of you said. And I'm going to quote from Sun Tzu 2,500 years ago, Art of War. In war, prepare for peace. In peace, prepare for war. What it basically means is we are supposed to optimize at all times.
Love that. Yeah, and I think taking a proactive approach towards right? Your vendors towards your workforce management is something that everybody's thinking about in this environment. And just a quick statistic, Consero recently did a survey of CFOs, and one of the things that we found was that 97% of CFOs are expecting their labor costs to continue rising in this environment amidst the war on talent and this remote work era. Moving on, and this goes nicely with your quote from Sun Tzu, Raj. Finance departments right now are in the midst of this talent war, which we're talking about, and while also still trying to cut operating expenses, like we're saying here. So this is leading a lot of CFOs to consider outsourcing their finance function to reduce some operating expense. And one of the things that I'd love to hear from you, especially given your experience working with big companies and more private equity, middle market size companies, is what are some of the key considerations that you look at when deciding whether to outsource or build a capability in-house?
I will have to quote from another great classic, by the way, Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations. It says, by the way, a division of labor increases productivity. And in other words, by the way, that people, they're more likely to innovate in areas where they put their whole attention to deliver a specific task. And that, by the way, this innovation leads to increased productivity. Look, I believe that the big companies which I work for, and they're operationally very well-run companies, IBM, Microsoft, Waters Kluwer, what I learned from that was that they actually, knowingly or unknowingly, they use this dictum very, very efficiently. So they make strategic plans, there's a strategic planning exercise, and they convert them into annual operating plans. How do you meet by the way, how do you execute on the plan? You basically need resources for that. If the companies already know they have optimal resources to execute their operating plans, then they will use those resources. But if they don't, usually big companies, and even small companies, by the way, they usually have an ecosystem of outsourcing companies. They can reach out to them at any point because they want to. The main goal is to execute the plan. They have already, if it's a public company, they have already told the investors, so they have to execute on those plans. And again, the strategic plans, they convert into annual operating plans. Companies' share prices go up and down. Stockholders lose or gain money because of that. So a lot of this is at stake. Now, you know that all the departments or functions, they are given, a certain time to execute, and they are given some resources. Those things are not that flexible, by the way, if you have to execute on the plan. The only thing is they have to decide they can do it on their own, or they outsource, or some kind of hybrid. I feel, by the way, that like companies, example, let's take an example of Consero. As you said in the beginning, you guys have done this so many times. It's so difficult, by the way, a company to do what you guys are doing in-house and replicate that in a short period of time. If time is of the essence, you have to go to a company like Consero. And I'm just taking an example of finance right now because we discussed finance. It's applicable to every single department. They have their own Conseros, or companies which do similar work for them. So if they think that they can do it fast, they have the resources, fine. The moment they feel like quality will be compromised, but somebody else can do it for us, they'll go to them. And that's basically brings the rationale for the existence of a company like Consero. And as I mentioned, again, quoting from Adam Smith, since you guys do it so much all the time, you must have developed capability to innovate. And that innovation is not so easy for a company to do it on a day-to-day basis. Now, I do want to tell you one thing that, suppose the companies feel that, what the outsourcing company is doing, it involves a lot of intellectual property. In the long run, that should belong to the company. Then they do try to bring in-house at some point. But in the meantime, outsourcing plays a great role in terms of the strategic execution of all the companies.
No doubt about it. And interesting statistic as well, just with respect to outsourcing. So anybody have a guess at which functional area is most outsourced?
Finance?
Finance is actually number 2. So 44% of companies outsource their finance function. IT is the number 1. So it's IT, finance, and then payroll and customer service. So those are the top four. But moving on, this one's a jump ball. So whoever wants to jump in and take a stab at it, just expanding on the inflation topic, right? So a lot of executive teams have had to deal with this, affects your FP&A models and hiring plans and things like that. But another thing it affects a lot is pricing. So just curious if you guys have any advice for how executive teams should be reevaluating their pricing strategy in 2023, or should it even be more frequent than that? Would love to just get your takes on it.
If you want, I can go first.
Please.
So look, everybody has learned in their life that every problem can be a very big opportunity. In a stable environment where inflation is growing by 2%, you go to your clients and you tell them, oh, I want to increase the prices. You feel like, oh, no, are you kidding me? It may not be taken seriously. In such a high inflationary environment, if you go to a client, even after all, you guys also have suppliers, your employees also, their salary is increasing. It was a very hot market, as we discussed before, for employees. Hence, they are actually open to this dialogue. So that's a good thing. I think that now every kind of vendor can go to their clients and tell them that, look, we need to increase prices because our bottom line is getting cut. So I think it's a very good opportunity. But in terms of, by the way, now you also have to see that how much, you got to have some kind of rationale to explain, that how much you want to increase the price and all that. Most companies, by the way, they ignore a very fundamental topic called product profitability. I think all the companies, if they can do it and they have the proper system and mechanism to measure everything, they should do this kind of exercise at some point, because it gives them an idea that, are you actually making any money out of product? Sometimes, it looks like that, a product is giving a lot of money, but if you allocate the overheads and all that, actually they're not even profitable at all. So some kind of profitability exercise, product profitability exercise using activity-based costing or something like has to be done. And then, by the way, after that, if you feel that, oh, you know what, we're losing money, you can at least explain to the customer that, look, this is the reason happening, and we need to. So I'm saying it gives you a good idea. And also, by the way, it also rationalizes your portfolio as well. Suppose something is very profitable, other one is not, then you can see, by the way, how to balance it out for the long run. So I think it's a very good opportunity, inflation in one way, again, that it opens the door for you, for the vendors to talk to their customer. And I think they're open to doing it. This is my perspective.
Yeah, Raja, we found that when we've had similar conversations recently with some of our clients that they are remarkably willing to work with you if you are upfront and transparent with them, and say, hey, we're just trying to maintain our margins here. We've been pressured because of this vendor or supplier or labor costs or whatever the case may be. That people are open to those types of discussions. They're all going through the same thing, right? And so obviously everything has to be done in the context of the market and where your competitors are and all those things, right? There's a big framework around it, but I would definitely say that don't be hesitant to have those conversations if you feel like that's what's best for your business.
Yeah, and I think that the word that comes to mind for me are levers, okay? Think creatively about the different levers you might want to bring to the conversation. So for pricing, think about, and not just in terms of your normal model, but think in terms of what else can you bring to the table? Is it multi-year term? Is it some kind of staggered discounting? Is it, what are the benefits that the customers have from you, and how do you leverage that by adjusting and tweaking those? And to Raj's comment, the other levers are back to my initial comment of efficiency and effectiveness. If you look across your portfolio and you can start to see the utilization optimization, you start to get an idea, then you can make some intelligent decisions about your company and also with integrity represent those challenges and trade-offs to your customers as well.
Great thoughts there. All right, let's shift gears and talk about the funding markets. So PitchBook put out a report recently just kind of highlighting all the Q4 activity and just 2022 in general. But one of the things that was kind of interesting to me, just coming out of the Q4 funding activity, specifically within venture capital, is that capital demand outpaced supply by over 145%. So effectively, you've got the same amount of companies that are competing for 50% of the capital that was available last year. PE, a little bit of a brighter spot, relative to venture. It looks like the number of deals fell only 5% year on year, 2022 versus 2021, but the deal sizes went lower. One part of that is just due to going after smaller, more add-on type acquisitions. Also, just valuations went down, so buyers took advantage and deals stayed up. But just from your perspectives, speaking with capital markets participants, right? What would you say are the things that companies should be doing in 2023 to position themselves to make them more attractive than, say, the next company for that next round of funding or for that private equity exit? And that's a jump ball for anybody.
Yeah, so I can why don't I speak on the end of the spectrum that we tend to be on, we're VC-backed companies. So I can certainly speak a little bit to that particular market. I do spend a fair amount of time talking to investors in that world. And one of the things that we've definitely seen well, first of all, anybody who tells you what they know is going to happen over the next 12, 18 months is a liar. That's one, right? So the first one is that you always want to find the person that says, I'm not sure what's going to happen. And I think depending on who you talk to, there's different varying opinions on whether the worst is over or we're going to see continued pain for the next 12 months or whatever the case may be. Having said that, nobody really knows. But one of the things that as I've spoken to people, appears to be pretty unanimous is that, like in any market, when there is this type of dislocation, that feels heavy, but I'll use that word, there's a flight to quality, and there's no difference here. So people are rediscovering in our world, line items on your P&L that seem to have been forgotten the last couple of years. Things like gross margin, EBITDA, net income, so growth at all costs, top line growth at all costs appears to be, at least for the moment, over. People want to see solid, fundamental economic discipline. So to have presentable margins that are repeatable and real, to have a line of sight towards things like cash flow neutral, are things that are really playing well in the market now. I think the company that, goes out for funding in the next 12 to 18 months and is able to say, hey, we have line of sight towards being EBITDA positive within the next 12 months, 12 and 4 months, and we have positive margins that are real, are going to have a real leg up on the competition. That's what I'm seeing right now, is that the economic fundamentals are beginning to matter once again, especially in our world where sometimes growth seems to become the overall obsession for companies, which, and maybe rightfully so in some certain situations, but that's certainly not the case now. And that's what we're paying attention to right now.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go on record, John, and on video saying it's going to get worse. Okay,
okay,
so
right.
we can look at a year from now and see if I was right. But I can tell you from all the things I've been studying, both here locally and on the macroeconomic scale, we're in for some tough sledding ahead. I think that understanding, we're organically funded, we're client funded. So we're looking for additional ways that we bring value to clients that they're wanting to invest in and do interesting things alongside. I've vetted over 3,000 startups in my career as an investor. I often say the best source of growth funding is organic, to go to a certain point, and then you need venture and PE to scale, go to a lot higher heights. But making sure, as I've talked to PEs and VCs over the past 2 quarters, that I understand their investment thesis, and many of them are looking for broader client concentration, that you don't have 1 or 2 clients that make up the majority of your revenue. They just want to see that those economics, like John was talking about, that you're enforcing. But let me just tell you, money's expensive right now. It's going to be expensive for a while. So figuring out ways to do scenario-based planning so that you don't have to require as much of external expensive funding, I think, is going to be of paramount importance. And as a bonus for those of you who stick around to the end of the call, I've used a modeling tool before. We've just used it twice to help us with our scenario planning. And with permission of Consero, I'll share that name of the company, and he's provided a discount code to anybody that's interested. I have no vested interest or a dog in the hunt. I just highly recommend scenario-based planning right now.
And by the way, I agree with absolutely what John said, about the metrics, he suggested, and also quite a bit, I agree with Craig as well. But, going back to the fundamentals, you guys know that when the activities even slow down, they don't never become zero. So the fundamental is that when a company has a value proposition that is unique, that they can produce something better than everybody, or they can do, produce better but cheaper than everybody, or they can produce much faster than everybody, then usually you are still able to attract funding. And in terms of exit, all the people who have been in the PE world, they know, as soon as you reach the rule of 40, or you have a good line to the rule of 40, I think you become an attractive target. So if you do those things, concentrate on, you have to keep the eye on the ball. If you do these two things, I think your chances of success will definitely increase, even if the market becomes tight.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure our panel or our audience will really appreciate those thoughts. As far as right, just looking at the workforce that each of you have, right, and the workforce that our audience has, right, with some potential tough sledding ahead, it could be challenging to keep management teams and employees motivated through these economic conditions, right? Maybe they might be looking at the next shiny object, the next position, and potentially more promising opportunity. What examples or tips might you have for ways to motivate your workforce amidst the economic uncertainty that we're seeing?
Well, I'll start. The one thing that we're focusing on, we're on plan in terms of our hiring plan for 23. But the one thing that we're really trying to emphasize now is clarity of purpose for our company, what we're doing, and making sure people are really aligned and bought into that, and clarity on path. So what is the career path opportunity for them within this transformation that we're doing? We're basically transforming our success into a platform as a service. And so it's a very exciting time here at Banking On, and we're doing that. But to make sure people know that they have an opportunity to grow in their skills, in their opportunities, their compensation, and the like, so that we beat the odds. The odds is people, they get into a job 6 months later, they kind of figure it out, then they do well for a year. After that, they start looking at their options. A year and a half to 2 years is about the average that you could hope for. So we're trying to give them reasons to stay motivated and to contribute to a longer term vision. And we've been effective so far at that, but I think that's a clarity of purpose and clarity of path.
Yeah, I agree, Craig, with both of those things. For us, it's three things. It's culture, it's culture, it's culture. For us, we spend an inordinate amount of time as a leadership team talking about working on our culture, and that word gets tossed around a lot, right? What does that really mean? For us, it really means being about as an authentic leadership team, being as transparent as we can possibly be with our employees, and all the things that allow them to be people at work rather than, Joe in accounting or, somebody in marketing. So, we're a startup. We're located in Northern California, although we're mostly remote now, but we can't compete salary-wise with the Googles and the Apples and the Facebooks of the world. We just have never, benefits-wise, we've never been able to do that. But I will say one of the things that I am really proud of over the last 3 years is that we've managed to attract an incredible team. And it's mostly because, look, I'll be straightforward, it's because when they go through the interview process, they end up liking the 5 people they talk to. And getting a vibe from them and understanding what the company's all about from those people. And we're on the talent side of the thing, I can honestly say I feel like we're winning because of that culture. It has to be a different thing for each company, but for smallish type places like us, we're 50 people now or whatever, it's invaluable. It's been an invaluable thing for us.
With us, by the way, I think very valuable lessons were learned during the COVID. And by the way, the last couple of years when the market was very hot. So I always remember, I read an article, and I think it's on the internet in many places. They say, that employees don't leave their companies, they leave their managers. And I think most companies, they don't invest enough in the well-being of the management team. It's basically managers evolve. When you're doing your job very well, you can manage the person. That doesn't mean anything, because management is very different than being a good engineer or a good finance person. So I think companies, when they invest in the management skills of the managers, that makes a very good company. Number one lesson which I learned. Number two is that I think we have to generally work towards improving the life of the employees. One of my very great bosses I had at IBM, his name is Ed. I'm going to use his first name. Ed was his first name, actually. So he used to, he used to say, like, Raj, go home on time. Okay, spend time with the family and finish the work later if you have to. I literally have been following this all my career now, that I tell my team, I'm not going to disturb you before 9 a.m. I'm not going to disturb you after 6 p.m. By the way, I promise you my team actually works very, very hard. You can call them. But at least I'm not micromanaging them all the time. So that's basically comfort for them. You can at least create a semblance of sanity. You don't have to cause panic all the time in the company. And as I said before, in time for, peace, prepare for war, and time for war, prepare for peace. What I'm trying to say is that you always have to optimize. You have to always keep learning, so that when the tough time comes, you have the skill set to pounce upon the things and get it done fast. So I think this proactive effort towards good management, looking at, by the way, their sanity of the team members. If you think, any department or something has issues, handle it right away. And one last but not the least, by the way, and this is on John's point, companies, mid-sized companies, small companies, we cannot even have the benefits of Microsoft and Google and, all those companies. But at least, you have to try your best. And I think it's a necessity that the benefits have to be at least at the median level in the market. If the employees don't get them, they will go somewhere else. So I think all these things. And, by the way, one last thing I want to say, recently an article came on Forbes about hybrid work. And, they're saying that actually it's not such a bad thing at all. Like some managers are saying, no, everybody should be home. I think flexibility is a good thing. You have to trust your employees. They'll do a good job.
Fantastic. Well, Allison, I'm not sure if any questions came in via the chat. If they did, feel free to jump on stage here and we could go through them. Otherwise, I've got a couple more questions.
Yes, we did have a couple come in. So one question was, I think it was during the pricing question. They asked, can you talk about how finance can influence the pricing while there is a resistance from sales or product side? And anyone can jump in on that one if they'd like.
Look, I can say something to you guys. First, fortunately, I've worked with many sales leaders, sales employees, and they are, by the way, I feel like they're the front engine of the company. If they don't sell, everything else is detail. We cannot survive as a company if they don't sell. On the other hand, by the way, there's motivations for everybody. For the salespeople, it's always they want to sell and they want to make their commissions. So it's a question, by the way, comes is that, okay, we want to have good product profitability. We want to have a good bottom line as CFOs. But then you have to incentivize the sales team in a manner that even if you increase the prices, they don't lose their compensation. In fact, incentives should be created in a manner that our bottom line is met, but they also make their incentives and commissions and all that. If you can make the right balance and they know by your measures, you're not trying to cut their compensation, but in fact, it may even help them more. I think if you can do that, and by the way, they trust you and you trust them, and you have to create that trust over time, by the way, then I think it'll work out very, very well.
Yeah, I think more broadly, even Raj, I agree with that. My motto has always been to compensate to motivate desired behavior. And I think that's the whole organization. I mean, when I was at Tableau, all of us were on commission from the CEO down. So we all had to pull the rope in the same direction because part of our annual total comp was a function of commission. So there are going to be adjustments. They're going to need to be, but you need to make it as closely as possible to reflect the reality. You need to make the trade-offs that the sales and product teams are understanding of. Yeah, hopefully they're in alignment with. But you're right, you can't penalize them for the market downturn, or I love that. Without the sell, everything else is detailed. So compensate to motivate the desired behaviors you may have in your organization.
I think what I just heard Craig say was that I need to go talk to my CEO about putting me on a commission-based plan as well. Is that what I heard?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. And then we have another question. So in determining ROI of personnel and working to improve efficiency, what would you suggest we do to better ensure and track all of this? And they noted that they track direct and indirect labor efficiency ratios already. So do you have any suggestions on other ways to track this?
Craig, you'll be the best person to answer this, considering your first answer.
Well, I come from industries where tracking is very light, because in the entertainment, consumer software entertainment business, if you do too much, like I started my career at Arthur Young, back when it was Arthur Young, tracking every 15 minutes of my time toward clients. If you apply that to my current environments, that would be suffocating to the creativity required to do the job. You need to put in project planning and then tracking against project milestones, and do so in a way, report on their hours. Like the last time that I put this in place, people could track what they were doing in 3 minutes a day, just updating their project status in 3 minutes a day. So in my experience, it's got to be lightweight, so there's high levels of adoption. And then initial premise, what are the key metrics the business needs to measure to find out utilization optimization that suggest answers to efficiency and effectiveness. So it varies widely, but my guiding principle is to, whatever you do, keep it lightweight in nature.
Yeah, I'm gonna quote somebody I know, gentleman by the name of Craig Fryer. I think you brought this up in our prep session, but I really was taken by your comment at that time about being careful about the data you're using to track operations and not weaponizing it. Right? There's ways to use it and keep it light to give you insight. And give you real, ability to make real decisions, but oftentimes it can be misused in a weaponizing sort of way that's not productive in any way. And I really was struck by that comment the other day, because I think that happens a lot, and I think it's something to think about for sure.
Yeah, by the way, I want to add something that people who are crunching numbers sometimes have a tendency to fall in love with their numbers. And that, by the way, is a very bad thing. So I think you have to step back yourself. You have to separate the forest from the trees. You have to find the story behind the numbers. When you find the story behind the numbers, you could reach different conclusions.
Definitely. Yeah, I like that. And then as a follow-up to that question, if an employee is not efficient, what are your thoughts on the fast fire approach that some take?
I would say do to yourself, do to others what you expect to be done to yourself. I think there's a right balance. Firing from the hip is not a good approach to management, because when you do that, other people also see it. Then people become afraid of making mistakes, and you don't want that kind of environment. Hence, unless the mistakes are really, really fatal to the company, which is a separate issue, if the mistakes are made and you can rectify the situation very fast, I think it can become a learning experience. Of course, by the way, there's a saying by a very notorious leader in the past, by the way, that everybody has a right to make mistakes, but some people abuse that privilege. So please don't abuse that privilege. Otherwise, good.
Yeah, I think onboarding and offboarding are the two most important times in a company to really reinforce and put rubber to the road on their culture, right? I think offboarding may be even more important. So doing so with respect, with honor, recognition for what's been done. As Raj says, unless you're on a performance plan that goes awry, I'm not a fan of fast firing at all. I think that could be a fatal mistake for companies that do so.
Totally agree. The only caveat to that is that, look, letting somebody go is never a pleasant thing, right? Nobody likes to do it. Nobody likes to think about it. You may like the individual. There's all sorts of emotional human responses to that sort of get in the way. I will say for us, as an organization, if I think we're pretty good about it, but if we've erred in any ways, sometimes it's not doing it quicker than we would have, which is always better for the individual anyways. But there's always a little bit of emotional avoidance that we all have as people, and to try to fight through that and do whatever needs to be done with grace and with respect that's sort of our go-to move. I just think that's the right thing to do for if no other reason than the culture, like Craig said. People see that and it means something.
Great stuff today, everybody, and thanks for the collective wisdom that you all brought to the audience here.